I don't know about you, but I am allergic to my mouse. Every time I need to lift my hand up off the keyboard and click and drag, I feel like I'm slamming on the brakes because I'm used to cruising through my code base with speed and precision. As a professional who's using Cursor every day to build software, I'm obsessed with keyboard shortcuts. So in this video, I'll show you some of my favorite Cursor keyboard shortcuts and a few interface tweaks that I've used to really streamline my workflow. Because that's what we do as professionals. We master our tools and our flow. It's about building speed and muscle memory so that nothing gets in the way of our creativity. I've been playing guitar my whole life, and once you've been playing a while, you stop thinking about scales and chords. Your hands and your fingers, they just know where to go so that you can focus on the music. That's how I want coding to feel. When I come in here and sit at my desk and fire up Cursor and Claude Code, I want to fly through my code base. I want to fire off commands to my AI agent with just a few keystrokes. I don't want to be thinking about navigating anything. I want to focus on building. So if you're like me and you want to stay sharp with your craft and you want to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to building with AI, then I'd love for you to join my Builder Briefing. It's a free 5-minute read that I send out weekly to professional builders like us. You can get on that by going to buildermethods.com. And subscribers will be the first to know about my Cursor course coming this year. So I'm going to cover several areas where I spend a lot of time working in Cursor, and I'll share all the little keyboard shortcuts that I use in all these different places. So we're going to start out with the Workspace and how I sort of managed that with the keyboard. Then, of course, we're going to look at how I interact with AI in Cursor with the chat window and working with AI in the files themselves. Then I'll get into managing your Files Explorer and going through files and firing up new files and things like that. Then we'll get into working in the code themselves and manipulating lines of code and jumping around the code base. And last but not least is the terminal. And of course, firing up new terminal tabs and tabbing between them and all that kind of stuff. Now, before I share my shortcuts for everything, it's really important for you to get into the habit of customizing your keyboard shortcuts for the moves that you make most often throughout every day in Cursor or in any application that you use. Right? It's about building up that speed and muscle memory for the most frequent actions. So in Cursor, you can customize your keyboard shortcuts in two ways. So I'm going to do Command-Shift-P. And by the way, I am on a Mac, so you're going to hear me say Command a lot. I think the alternative is Control on Windows. So Command-Shift-P will open up this options picker. I don't know what they call that. And you can just type in keyboard. And there are these two options, right? One is to go to your keyboard shortcuts preferences. And that's like a menu and an interface that you can use to find any keyboard shortcut and customize it. You can search by the name of the feature, which sometimes I just don't know what features are called. But you can also click this button and search by the keyboard shortcut that you already have. And then, of course, you can go in here and customize them. System means that it's like built into the system sort of like by default. And user means that you have customized it. Now, that's one way to customize your shortcuts, but I actually prefer going into the JSON. This is like a code version of the same thing. And actually, this lives in my user key bindings JSON, which means that this file will override the default key bindings that ship with Cursor. And also keep in mind that Cursor is a fork of VS Code. So all of these features and customization options and a lot of the default key bindings come from VS Code. And that might be helpful if you're ever going into ChatGPT or Claude or the AI in Cursor to ask for help with key bindings. Even though they are aware of Cursor as a thing, it's sometimes better to say, hey, in VS Code, how do I change this or that, when really you're working in Cursor because it is a fork of VS Code. Anyway, this is my personal key bindings JSON. This is where I added a couple of custom key bindings. There's actually not a whole lot here. I used to have more, but I sort of like culled it down to just the ones that I happen to actually use all the time, every single day. So I'm going to cover these individually as we get through the video, but I just wanted to point out that here in the JSON, you can give it the key command, and then this is the actual feature or functionality in Cursor or in VS Code that you'll need to have exactly right. It's often really hard to know exactly what these things are called. You can sort of get a clue by looking through these keyboard shortcuts. That is where I find that, like, asking ChatGPT or Claude for what's the name of this or that feature so that you can target it in this user key bindings file. The when setting means that This key command will only be effective when you're in this particular mode or state within Cursor. And so since these are sometimes kind of cryptic to read, I like to add these comments to just remind myself, like, what is each thing. All right, so let's start at the workspace layout level. This is what I'm looking at. I've got my files on the left. I've got the AI chat on the right. I've got my terminal on the bottom and my file in the middle. And I'm always toggling each of these panels on and off. So popping the terminal up and down for me, that's Command T. And I think that is a customization that I made. Yeah, toggle terminal, Command T. That's this workbench, action terminal, toggle terminal. And then my Files Explorer on the left, I can toggle that open and closed with Command B. And the AI chat on the right, that is Command L. I'd say most of the time I'm in this layout with my files shown on the left and the AI chat on the right. Even if I'm not actively using the chat, I sort of like to have this, narrow-ish view of my file right in the center of my screen. I find that when I close out the File Explorer, my head is turning too much to the left to see my code. So, I like to keep it right in the center of the screen. Could be because I have like neck and back issues. Back in the VS Code days before Cursor came around, I had it flipped. I had my files on the right. And if I open up my user settings, that was this one. I ended up commenting this out. So it used to be like that for me, where I had, just my files on the right, which was sort of nice because my code didn't really change its position. But then once the AI chat came into play with Cursor, it sort of made more sense to put that on the right side. So I'm going to comment that out again. And the other sort of workspace view that I use from time to time is the new background agents feature in Cursor. You can get to that with Command E, and that's where I can fire up a new background agent. And then when I have them running, it can open up a larger interface to see my background agents. I have an entire video on my channel that dives into the background agents feature in Cursor if you want to check that out. All right, so if you're using Cursor, then of course you're building with AI. So let's dive into the AI features in Cursor and how I have customized some of the shortcuts to fit my workflow. Let's start with tab completion. This is one of those things that I think a lot of us developers have like a love-hate relationship with. So I'll be on this line of code and I'll hit return, and then, it's suggesting some new code for me to add, which of course I can add with just a tab. But, what if I just want to use the tab key like a normal tab key and add some space? You can't really do that right out of the box. So I added a shortcut for that. I can do Control Tab to do a regular tab, and then of course Shift Tab to go back. That way I can still use the tab completion, which I do a lot, but whenever I need to do an actual tab, I'll just do, Control Tab like that. It's just part of my muscle memory now, even to the point where if I'm in like a Google Doc or something and I want a tab, I'm hitting like Control Tab when really over there I just need to use tab. And by the way, my custom key binding for the Control Tab shortcut is right here. So I've got Control Tab as the key. The command is tab, and then I have when set to editor text focused and not editor read only and not editor tab moves focus. So this is the line right there that allows me to set up normal tabs. And while we're on the subject of tab completions, the more that you use them, the more you get a feel for how they actually work. I like to sort of tip off Cursor to sort of nudge it in the direction that I want it to handle my tab completions. It's kind of hard to explain, but you start to notice that like if you make one change, you'll expect the tab completion to do the rest. So one example would be when I'm working with Tailwind CSS. In Tailwind 4, we put configurations in CSS files. And so this is usually how I handle setting up like my brand colors, right? Where I have a primary color, a secondary color, sometimes a tertiary, a gray. And, what if I wanted to like add another one? I don't know, we'll call this like my active color, right? So I want each of these lines to be color active 50, active 100, active 200, right? So if I just change the first one, and yeah, right away, it's starting to see what I want. And so it's like, I knew that was coming because I sort of tipped it off by, putting my down arrow on the line below. It's sort of a feel thing. I just like this idea of like playing the code and the keyboard like an instrument, and tab completions is sort of like a big part of that now. Now, one of the AI features in Cursor that for whatever reason, I just never really use, that's the inline AI chat thing. I don't even know what they call that. When you're in a file like this, you can do Command K, and that'll bring that up. I just never touch that. I always use the chat window on the side, which again, I open up with Command L. And what I like about that is I can highlight specific lines of code, and I would usually do something like this and then Command L. And then I can see there that it got lines 25 through 28 into the context window, and it highlighted the chat window. So I can say, explain this and have it explain what's going on there, right? So now that we're in the chat window, which is where I spend a lot of time in Cursor, of course, we can start up a new chat with Command N. That's always good to sort of like clear out the context and just start over. That can help with accuracy. And you'll need to do that when your context windows just go really long. And if you're moving on to a new topic or a new question, it's always good to sort of clear out any past discussions that could throw AI off a little bit. Now in the chat window itself, you can use the / key to get into some commands here. Like I just did, reset the context, although I usually just do that with Command N. You can generate cursor rules, but I usually do that manually. So I actually don't use these too much. I just want to mention that you do have a / key that can get you into things like that. But one thing that I do use quite a bit from the keyboard is Option Command P, and that's going to add specific files into my context. This is what I do a whole lot, right? If I'm like in this file here, but I know that I want to ask a question that is going to relate to something else, I could use the mouse to click this tiny button over here, but I want to stay away from my mouse. So I'm going to do Option Command P, and then I can, add that color CSS, or I can find, application controller and add that in there, right? And then I can escape and I can ask a question. I don't know what I would be asking with those 3 files, but that's just an example. All right, so now let's just have the AI add a posts model to my application so that I have some files that I can accept. By the way, Cursor just launched this new feature called to-do lists, which is pretty cool. It'll actually make a little to-do list for itself, and it'll sort of track its progress throughout a task like this. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so that is all done. And, I've done a few videos on Claude Code and Cursor and the differences between them. And I must say that this part of the workflow where I'm reviewing code and I'm accepting individual changes, this is really where Cursor shines over Claude Code. As much as I love Claude Code and it's really capable as an autonomous agent, Cursor is really excellent for going through, multiple files and changes. And so one thing that I can do here is I could click these arrows to go through 10 different files where it made some changes, but I can also do Option L and Option H. That's going to sort of page through these 10 different files, and I can go into each one and take a look. I can accept the individual file with Command Return, and then I can sort of keep going through. Command L, Command H to go back and forth. I can reject or accept individual lines with Command N, Command Y. But if I'm happy with all the files and I want to accept them all in one shot, then I can focus the chat window here and I can do accept all. Instead of doing that with my mouse, I'll do it with my keyboard, which is Command Return. All right, so now let's turn our focus over to the other side of my screen in Cursor, and that's the File Explorer window. As I said earlier, I can toggle it open and closed with Command B. And if I have the File Explorer already open, but the file that I'm working in is currently focused, to shift the focus over to the File Explorer so that I can move around and do things, I'll do Command Shift E. So now the focus is on my File Explorer. And let's say I want to kind of collapse all these different folders and subfolders, which I have to do all the time. I'll do Control Shift Up, just like that. Everything becomes collapsed. And then I often use the arrow keys to go up and down, or sometimes I'll just press like P or the letter of whatever it is that I want to jump to here. And then I'll hit the right arrow to open a folder, and I'll go down, left arrow to close it. So I do that a lot, but really the more professional way to jump around your files, of course, is to hit Command P and search for any file that you want, right? So if I want to find the application layout, I'll just go like that. So Command P all day long. This might be my most used shortcut in Cursor. It opens up my recent files. And one thing that you'll probably notice is I don't have the file tabs across the top. That's something that usually comes with VS Code. I disabled that feature because I hate to see all those different tabs. Just visually, there's a lot of clutter. they're just not easy to navigate. So I just use Command P to jump around to my recent files, right? So if I'm in post, I can go back to form, I can go back to location. I could use Control W to clear this out, I think, but I actually almost never do that, as you can see. Okay, so it gives me this alert to do it. I just never even use that shortcut. I just always have, my recent files in this selector, and that's how I do it. And if I need to get to a new file, again, I'll use the same thing, Command P, and it'll get me to where I'm going. That setting to disable the tabs in cursor is a user setting, which again, I did Command Shift P to open up this like settings navigator in cursor, and I'll open up user settings JSON, and this is the line. So if I comment this out and save, my tabs come back. Ugh, I gotta get those out of here. So I'm gonna uncomment that and save. Okay. As you can see, I disable a lot of the noise that comes with cursor. I got a lot of these tips from Caleb Porzio from Livewire, and I won't go through all of these here today, but this is a really big one for me. Disabling the tabs, which is Workbench, Editor, Show Tabs, Single. I guess I'm just showing a single tab all the time, and again, I just use the this, I don't know what you call this, like the file jumper thing, sort of jump around my files and then escape, and then I'm back in. All right, the last thing that is files related, of course, is creating a new file, which I do all the time. For this, I'm actually using an extension. So I'm gonna open up my extensions window, which I can do Command Shift X to get to those. And I have advanced new file. So what this does is it gives me a shortcut. It's Option Command N. And then here I can do all sorts of things, right? Like I can just start in the root and do like custom folder, custom file, something like that, and just create a new folder and a file all in one shot. That's really easy, a lot easier than doing like a new file the default way. I really like that. All right, now let's get our hands dirty in the code itself. I know we don't do this a whole lot anymore since AI is writing a lot of our code, but I'm still in here fiddling with lines of code pretty often. So here are sort of like my code line manipulation keyboard shortcuts, right? One that I use all the time is duplicating a line. So if I want this line to be duplicated, as long as my cursor is anywhere on this line, could be at the beginning, the middle, the end, I can just do Command D, and that entire line will be duplicated. And that duplicate line is in my key bindings. That's right here. So Command D, editor action, copy lines, down action when the editor is in focus. Okay, another one that I use all the time is deleting an entire line. So let's say I want to knock this whole line out. Again, my cursor can be anywhere on this line. I'm going to do Command X to just knock out the entire line. I'll undo that. And that key binding is right here. Delete line, Command X. We're going to delete lines. All right, another thing that you'll do quite often is commenting out lines. So again, my cursor can be anywhere on a line, and I can do Command / to comment out that line. Or I can even highlight multiple lines and do Command / to comment all of them out. And I can do the same thing to uncomment. That one I'm using all the time. All right, folding code is also something that I do quite often, especially when I have a really long files. So here's a method that I want to fold up. I'll do Command Shift open bracket to fold it up, and Command Shift closed bracket to open it up again. Another one is moving a line up or down, right? So again, I'll just put the cursor anywhere on this line, and if I want to move that up or down, I'll do Option down or Option up. Option down, I can move it anywhere I want to. Option up. And I often combine those with the folding. So if I fold up this method and highlight it, then I can move that whole method up or down, even though it's a really long piece of code. So I do that a lot as well. All right, so you've already seen me do this a few times here, but so I'm always, looking to jump the cursor around. To jump to the end of a line, I'll do Command arrow right. To jump to the beginning of the line, Command arrow left. To jump across every word in a line, I'm holding down Option and right and left. That's a fast way to get through it. And then selecting lines. So let's say my cursor is like in the middle of a line right here, and I want to select just the rest of the line. I'll do Command Shift to the right. So that's going to highlight everything to the right of the cursor up until the end of the line. The opposite would be everything to the beginning of the line. Command Shift left goes like that. Or I can go to the beginning of the line and Command Shift right to highlight the entire line. So let's catch up on some of these customizations that I made in the key bindings JSON. So here is my fold and unfold. That's shift command, open bracket and close bracket. That's editor fold and editor unfold. I have duplicate line, and then I have delete line. This was that normal tab thing that I showed you earlier. The last thing that I do quite often is just jump the cursor to the very top or the very bottom of a file, and that's just command up to go to the very top, command down to go to the very bottom. Sometimes I do that to then do command A to select everything. But yeah, that's a handy one as well. All right, let's talk about the terminal. I'm spending more time than ever in here, mostly because of Claude Code. And if you've seen my other videos on the channel about Claude Code, you know that, of course, you can integrate Claude Code directly into Cursor, as I've done. I can do that and pull up Claude Code up here. But as I talked about my workspace earlier, I just don't like the placement of this in the workspace. And so I really don't use the built-in Claude Code window. Instead, I just prefer Claude Code right in the terminal, which is right here. So I open up my terminal with Command T. I toggle that up and down all day long. And so here in the first terminal, I have Claude opened, and then I opened up a second terminal. So to open up a new terminal tab, I'll do Control Shift open bracket, just like that. And then to flip between my different terminal tabs, I'm doing Command Shift bracket left and bracket right, just like that. And to show you those custom key bindings, we are toggling the terminal open and closed with Command T. This is the new terminal tab, Command Shift open bracket. Navigating between them, I think, is just a system built-in keyboard shortcut for Cursor. And then, of course, clearing the terminals. If I have some stuff here and I want to just get rid of that, Command K will clear it out for me, which I do a lot. And in case you didn't know, you can highlight stuff in the terminal and then do Command L to take what's in the terminal, throw it up into the AI chat. As I can see here, I have lines 1 through 14 highlighted. So then I can ask AI what's going on with this error message that I'm seeing over here. And a lot of times if I have like really long logs, I'll need to just highlight specific lines and then add to chat with Command L, just like that. Now, if you're a power user in Cursor, and I'm going to say that you are because you're watching this video, getting those keyboard shortcuts down, building that muscle memory, then you may have heard about background agents in Cursor. It's a newer feature. They just made it even better in Cursor 1.0. And so I have a deep dive video going into how you can use background agents in Cursor to crush your backlog. So right after you hit subscribe on this channel, head over there and let's keep building.